Sanbonani, hello, and welcome to the Rise and Thrive podcast brought to you by the EU delegation to Eswatini. This podcast is dedicated to uplifting voices and breaking down barriers. I'm your host, Rodamakio, and this is Aired Out, a 4-part series initiative aligned with the global 60 Days of Activism campaign, which aims to address violence against women and children. In this episode, we will be in conversation with Mhlengi Dlamini, a counsellor from Survivor Eswatini, and later we will hear from a survivor as they share their experiences with gender-based violence. I'm a survivor, he's a warrior, one day. And with me today is Mhlengi Dlamini, who works at Survivor Eswatini, counseling both male and female victims of sexual violence. Welcome, Mhlengi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Could you please share a bit about Survivor Eswatini and the work that you do, the impact that it has?
I work for Survivor Eswatini. We specialize in a support group model, trying to help victims of sexual violence, harassment, sexual assault. But primarily, we don't like to refer to them as victims. We refer to them as survivors because that's our ethos, if I could put it like that. We focus on the recovery aspect of the experience, a traumatic experience, but we feel as if it's important to make it present from the beginning that you are able to recover from that. So by focusing on both men and women, we're trying to engage the community or Eswatini as a whole. Again, addressing both genders because it wouldn't be fair to only assume that only women get raped. Men have experiences in as much as they don't share them as often as we'd like them to. But we want for there to be an outlet for other men to have the support needed to overcome that experience. However negative, there's always a bright side at the end of there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. So that's basically what Survivor does, creating the support network, really. Because social support is very important for a lot of people. So even making friends, that's a social network. But we professionalize it using counselors, using the therapeutic process, trying to engage with these people, help them meet other survivors of the experience, see how they were able to deal with it, address their trauma, if I could put it, address their trauma and try to overcome and live a better life.
Right. I really love the emphasis on building community that you have. But just so that, everyone listening is on the same page, how could you please define sexual assault? What counts as sexual assault?
Of course, it's a complicated subject. We don't know where the line is drawn. So sexual assault or sexual violence, if I could put it, is any act of aggression directed to someone who isn't giving consent. That's, I feel like, where the line is drawn. It starts and ends with consent, really. So then we can start to discuss things like sexual coercion, where sort of not giving you the choice but to say yes, which is a very unfair circumstance. But we like to address it because it's a very serious form of abuse that we don't. It's a new form of abuse, especially in Eswatini. So we don't really have the safeguards against that. There's a sexual harassment where you may have your colleagues at work or people at school coming with sexual advances that you don't want as a woman, especially. I am aware, it's a serious issue. And there's no outlet to say, I don't want this person to be flirting with me. He's trying to flirt, but I don't want that. There's no barrier for that. Then there's other versions that we can then, it becomes complicated as we keep negotiating what counts and what doesn't count. But then the main issue is consent. Is what I'm doing welcome to the individual? That's the main. Then, of course, the one we all know, rape. the grotesque act of engaging without consent.
And you talk about coercion. So I guess the consent would have to be like, freely given,
Of course, of
enthusiastic,
course.
without any pressure.
Yeah, without, thank you. Yeah, of course.
Um, okay, so in your experiences, what are the common barriers that prevent survivors from speaking out about their experiences? What is your approach to help them seek help?
Being able to communicate trauma is difficult. So, again, our emphasis on our support group network allows when someone does eventually try to speak up, it may take time, years even. People sit with the emotional turmoil. And when they do finally say, I've been through this, it's very important for us to be hands-on with our approach. We try to encourage them to share their experience, but of course, at their own pace. Don't try to aggravate the situation with our treatment. We put emphasis again on our confidentiality process, like we having the trust with the person suffering and counselor, having that therapy, building the therapeutic relationship is very important because we have to build a relationship first for the healing to begin. Yeah, so you can only do that with someone you trust. You have to trust me or whoever the counselor may be, of course, to help you with the process. There's a lot of limitations to opening up about these things, and being in the position to encourage people is important, in as much as it may be difficult for them.
Okay, so you've spoken about, a little bit about the things that are in your practice, like confidentiality, building rapport, building trust. What other safeguards do you have in your practice to make sure your clients aren't re-traumatized by the process?
Safeguards are always there, of course. From our onboarding process, we go through a sort of screening of the individual. We profile them, see their risk categories, how recent the experience is, how sensitive they are to it still. All of these are very important steps that we are aware of, that they are necessary for us to engage with the individual and show them that we genuinely have empathy, maybe sometimes sympathy for them, whatever helps them get through this difficult period in their life. So our onboarding process we try to be thorough with it, so we don't find ourselves engaging with someone who may be suicidal and we didn't address it from the beginning, right? So we have to try to act in a way that minimizes the harm to the person suffering. We try to engage with them in how can I put this? We try to be the friend standing with you, trying to overcome the situation as opposed to a professional setting. We try to bring it down to earth, if I could put it. And of course, using the support, because the support group network is very important in removing a lot of the emotional barriers, understanding the emotional triggers that are there when someone is dealing with something so sensitive. It's very easy to find yourself doing harm when you're telling yourself you're doing good. So by using things like our sense of integrity, which is very important to Survivor Eswatini, our sense of integrity, we take responsibility for the individual and their plight, if I could put it like that. And of course, we have a responsibility to help them be therapeutic with our process, be constructive, if I could put it, as opposed to being destructive. Because there's no way of avoiding the trauma if you're trying to overcome it. But within our process, we're trying to create the space for positive emotions after the fact. So it's a difficult process. It's energy consuming for everyone involved. But then we try to help them picture the rewards of it at the end. Like imagine yourself outliving this point in your life, being able to remember there was a time where I was like this. It hurt so much, but right now, look at who I am. That's the whole point. I think, yeah, that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. people suffer a lot, and we want to find a way to help them meet each other and see, like, oh, this is how you dealt with this. I was trying to be up and about with my life, but then I got back into my space, or my counselor said something I didn't like. I felt it was insensitive. How did you deal with that? That's the whole point of the support group network. Even if they feel uncomfortable telling me directly, you see, it opens up the space to say, oh, so and so said, you said something, and then I can go address it like, oh, we can work through it. I understand your sensitivity now. It's all about finding the best possible solution, the best possible way to promote health, even after the fact.
Sounds like you have a very empathetic, open practice. That sounds beautiful.
We try.
Are there any signs that people can look out for as indicators that a loved one maybe is in an abusive relationship or situation?
It's difficult to diagnose someone at face value, seeing them on the street, like, oh, you're dealing with this and this and this. It's very hard. But it gets easier if you know the person intimately, I guess. You may not know exactly what's going on, but your friends, your family, maybe even colleagues you're close with, you can then notice behavioral changes, like the common things, social isolation, being reclusive, people being agitated in a sense, the annoyance, the general, I don't know. There's just this sense of disbelief that they find themselves in. And maybe you can try and pick up on those things like, I know you, this isn't you, what's going on? See, now you have to ask the question because it's very hard to know exactly what's going on. So if you want to know, it's more than okay to ask as a friend, as a person I'm close to, like, yeah, that's part of the whole process. If you want to know, ask, and don't ask maliciously, of course. It's be positive about it, if I could put it. Yeah, simply. Yeah.
And also, that's how we strengthen community, which
Of
you're all
course, of
about.
course.
Are they specific practices or coping mechanisms that you encourage survivors to explore as they work through their trauma?
Yeah, yeah. Coping mechanisms. There's a lot out there. I mean, I'm sure we can all Google some right now and see a whole list of things you can try to do. Some of them seem silly at first. They seem like, oh, I'm not gonna do this. But like, try it out. It might actually work out for you. For me personally, I like to use breathing exercises when I'm feeling stress or pressure, but in particular for victims of trauma. We try to encourage things like nature therapy, which is very important. Being out in nature, it's as if you're offering an escape from the circumstance, from the experience. You're trying to see the beautiful things that are still out there in life. Yeah, I feel like that's very important because you forget the things that make you happy, the things that bring you joy. And nature therapy, like seeing a beautiful flower, will just sort of re-inspire that part of you that's dying. You try to give it life. We use creative outlets like painting, drawing. Like these are very important. It's not everyone buys into the process of I'm an adult trying to draw, but like it's a creative outlet. Putting yourself in a state of play, being playful with your mind. Again, trying to put all of this aside and creating something, being inspired, trying to create that environment for you is important. We also use, of course, the support groups and all of that. So if you're ever in a situation where you need help, you feel like, oh, my feelings are being aggravated, I feel like I'm being triggered by something, it's always easier to call someone who knows exactly what's going on, the depth of it, and help you through it. These are some of the things we try to use when we're trying to help people cope with their emotions.
And speaking of getting in contact, do you have any resources that you want to share? How do people get in contact with Survivor Eswatini?
Of course, we have our social media. Primarily, I feel like social media is a good place to start. You can search Survivor Eswatini support group, and on Facebook or Instagram, where you can get all our details, and you can even make an appointment on there. Appointments, of course, are offered for free because we feel like it's important to make it available to everyone who need it. And we don't want any barriers to entry, like, oh, I can't afford it or what. So we try on our part to make it available to everyone who finds us or is referred by a friend. So again, Survivor Eswatini support group.
Thank you so much. It really does sound like you have a wonderful practice. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your time with us. I think it was really a really empathetic view of survivors, and I think we're all going to walk away with that. This conversation touches on experiences of sexual and physical violence, which may be triggering for some listeners. Please take care of yourself and feel free to pause or step away if needed. Thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you.
Could you please share your experience with abuse and what gave you the courage to share your experience with us today?
Okay. I started experiencing abuse from as early as 6 years. I come from a very big family, a polygamous family. So they are the kind of people who do not take girls serious. Like whenever a girl child is born in the family, they just look forward to benefiting from giving out that child as early as they reach puberty stage for child marriage. So growing up in such a family was not easy because even going to school wasn't accepted, but I tried to force things out and sometimes would stay with other people from the community who saw the potential in me. So what happened is that they started hating me because they felt like I wasn't conforming to the, their religion, their way of doing things in their family. And then they sold me out to someone because they wanted him to break my virginity when I was 16. That was the first case of abuse that I encountered. And when I reached out for help from someone in the community, they came for me and I had to run from home and stayed with that person until we went to the police station. I left home completely. But 2 years later, I decided to go back home with the hope that I'll be able to mend the relationship with my mother, more especially because I needed her so much. Life wasn't easy without her. So she kind of welcomed me back home. And little did I know that they were planning something big at this time around. So during the time of COVID-19 lockdown, they managed to give me away to someone, a forced marriage, and there was no way I could reach out for help because it was locked down. It wasn't easy. I didn't have a cell phone. They just took everything away from me that I could use. The only time I could go out of that place was when I had to go to hospital because he made me fall pregnant.
So, how did you escape that environment?
I was able to escape that environment with the help of a nurse from one of the hospitals in the country because I had two children from that situation um, with a very close age gap. I fell pregnant when the other one was only 2 months. So I had to go to hospital because I had given birth through C-section. So it was routine. And when I was admitted at the hospital, I tried talking to one of the nurses because most of them they wouldn't want to listen or they'll just jump into conclusion and feel like I don't take my life seriously, I'm reckless. But one of them, luckily, was able to listen to me and she tried getting help from me by reaching out to SWAC. And from the hospital, I was discharged and placed at a safe house around the country. So they gave me shelter, protection until I was ready to give birth to the second child, and they then took all the children to a baby home.
Are there any surprising ways where that the abuse that you've experienced has affected you? You're in relationship with yourself, to others, to like your environment.
It has affected me so much. Firstly, with the relationship I have with myself, I think I don't know who I am anymore, and I can't really say I know my worth. And I feel like all these instances, something died in me because I um uh
It's okay, you can take your time.
I think I'm still trying to find a way. I'm still trying to find a way to cope because with relationships, uh, friendships, or even with relationships with with the people who are taking care of us at the center, I feel like I can't trust any one of them. And with friends, I have tried to tell my story to some of them because at the safe house they helped me with my education. So luckily enough, I was able to go back to school. I'm in the university. So most of the time, people would notice that I'm not okay because healing is complicated. One day you seem okay, the next minute you feel like everything is behind you. But the next moment, just one thing triggers everything. So they kind of felt like, having me as a friend was a burden to them because I'm unpredictable. And with relationships with the opposite sex, it's even worse because I once got in a relationship after all this mess just last year. So telling someone what you've been through, I think it reduces you to nothing. So yeah, I think I can't even relate to people. So I've just tried to create my own world in my own mind. That's where I live and relate.
That sounds incredibly lonely. I'm so sorry about that. You're not able to find, community with other people. Um, what has helped you most in dealing with these feelings of, being isolated, the feelings of shame, the stigma that you've experienced, when you share your story with people? What resources do you find helpful when getting help?
I think, firstly, the place where I'm staying, the safe house, the counseling that we receive from time to time, I think that has helped me to survive till this far.
I'm glad that you have that at least environment of safety. I'm really glad that you found that for yourself. If there's one message that you could share with others that have experienced gender-based violence, but don't want to speak up, what would you tell them?
I would encourage them to just try to get help as soon as possible because it has cost me a lot to keep things to myself. And if it's abuse, I think it should just be abuse, regardless of who is doing it. Because I think the mistake that I made was protecting my family, thinking that I had a better place in their hearts and not wanting to expose them. The love I had for them costed me my dignity. So I would encourage someone who's going through abuse or feels like they are in danger just to reach out as soon as possible, as soon as they can. Because if you endure abuse for a long time, it's hard to go back to your normal self. And some of uh, the scratches that you suffer, they are eternal, they are permanent. For example, with the situation that I went through, I had a problem with my uterus. It had to be removed So that's something permanent. And my children are not with me. They will be away for 18 years, of which means that my life has changed in a very big way. So if you're going through abuse, just choose yourself. The earlier, the better.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate you for coming out, taking your time to speak with us. And yeah, thank you so much. And be sure to follow the EU delegation at EU in Eswatini on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to stay updated on when episodes are released.